Do you like apples?
Yeah.
Well, I got a number. How do you like them apples?
Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo, broadcasting live from my parents' guest bedroom in Wayne, Pennsylvania.
And I am Dan Simon, broadcasting from the Studio Simon and Studio Simon Stumper headquarters in Louisville, Kentucky.
So, Dan, at the time of this recording, I am in, as I mentioned, I'm in the Philadelphia area. My brother and I just ran the Philadelphia Half Marathon, which is absolutely my favorite road race out there in the world. Like, the spectators are hilarious and loud. The route is amazing. Like, you go through all these landmarks in Philadelphia. I love running in big cities. But one of the funny things was, just sort of by happenstance, it just happened to be the shirt that came up in the rotation. I was wearing my Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs shirt. And the number of people who were super excited to see a minor league baseball T-shirt in this race, because there was a lot of people who are always yelling, there's a lot of Go Birds, there's a lot of Go Phils. And, it's one of the funny things about running the Philadelphia Half Marathon is that other places they have funny signs about running and worst parade ever and why did I pay for this and all this just for one beer at the end. The Philadelphia Half Marathon is all people like yelling things about sports, which I find to be hilarious. But people loved that I was wearing my Iron Pigs t-shirt. Obviously, it's the AAA affiliate of the Phillies, but I felt like minor league baseball was getting some love. A lot of Go Pigs, that sort of thing.
Well, coincidentally, see, you're out of town now for the Thanksgiving weekend, so we're now dating this podcast recording. I happen to have been away this past weekend. My wife went undergrad to the University of Florida and is a major Florida Gator football fan. And we have watched virtually every single Florida Gator football game since we have been together, and we've been together quite a while now. And we were watching a game just a month or 6 weeks ago, and I mentioned to her, we've been together all this time, and we've never been to a Gator game together. And she said, do you want to go? And I said, sure, I want to go. And the next thing we know, she's booked our trip to see the Florida Gators play the Tennessee Volunteers. And the reason I'm telling this story is because you came up in conversation.
Oh.
My wife already has a fair amount of Florida Gator gear.
Sure.
I don't, being that I didn't go there. So being that we were going to the game, one of the first things we did when we got to campus was went directly to the school store, which is gigantic, and one of at least two, if not more. And we were walking out, got myself some Gator gear, and the game did not go too well for the Florida Gators. After the first quarter, total yard totals were, well, that's redundant, but I will continue going anyway.
I like it.
Were 202 yards for Tennessee, 1 yard for Florida. And it didn't get much better after that.
The abbreviation for that stat is TYT, total yard totals.
Okay, so look for that in
in the box score.
Box score near you. So we're walking out, going down the ramps and out of the stadium, and this big guy in Tennessee gear sees me wearing my Florida gear and puts his arm around me and he says, "You guys played well tonight." And my wife looks at him and says, Were you at the game? Now, clearly he was. And the thing is, he had a few during the game. He was being friendly. I appreciate it. At least he wasn't, trash talking. Anyway, cut to our flight home, and I'm sitting next to my wife, and we were recounting that encounter. And I was talking about Paul Caputo because wherever you go, you tend to be even if you're not attending a minor league baseball game, you tend to be wearing usually minor league gear. Right now, you are wearing a Philadelphia Phillies quarter zip or full zip. I can't tell.
I am wearing a Holly Springs Salamander t-shirt underneath here.
And the reason I pointed this out is because one of the wonderful things about sports is that we fans tend to gear up. And when we are geared up, whether we're at a game or whether we're out somewhere else in the wild, it normally leads to encounters and conversations and camaraderie.
Hmm.
What's that logo? Oh, or knowing the logo and going, hey,
Yeah.
go Gators or go Iron Pegs and whatever. And it really it brings us all together. And
I'm a huge proponent of that. And every time I see someone wearing a minor league gear, I will find a way to say something. And like when I come back to the Philadelphia area, we'll go down to the Ocean City, New Jersey and go to the boardwalk. And I'm always like scanning the crowd for like, because everyone's wearing hats and t-shirts, right? Like, so I'm scanning the crowd for like and I think people think I'm some sort of weirdo. I might be some sort of weirdo, but they think I'm some sort of weirdo because I'm just like looking people sort of up and down, looking for minor league baseball stuff so I can, shout them out and say hello. But Dan, we're way on the wrong side of the country right now with logos that we are meant to be talking about. This episode here is about a West Coast League team, a collegiate summer level team in Yakima, Washington, the Yakima Valley Pippins. Guess what? You are the featured designer. So we're going to talk to you again later on in this episode. We are also going to speak with Jordan Rowland, who is the new general manager for the team. And then, Dan, at the time of this recording, we're trying to line up someone who can talk to us about apples in the Yakima Valley in Washington. We're still nailing down who exactly that's going to be, but stay tuned for an apple-based interview later on in this episode. And then you're going to be back with a studio assignment stumper.
I will indeed. I will see you in just a bit.
All right, welcome to the podcast, Jordan Rowland, who is the general manager with the Yakima Valley Pippins. First of all, Jordan, am I saying Yakima correctly? I feel like I've been wrestling with that over the years.
You got it right, man. That's pretty good.
Yakima Valley Pippins. Jordan, good morning. How are you doing?
Doing great, man. Thanks.
This is a team that's been around since 2014, but you are involved with a new ownership group and new leadership with this team. Before we get into the meaning of the logo and the story that it tells, what was your impetus for getting involved with this team?
Yeah, so I've worked for the West Coast League for the last couple of years, just telling stories, helping kind of do some video with all of our MLB players. And I've worked with the Portland Pickles for the last few years. Some of you guys might have heard of the Pickles. Shot a documentary for MLB Network called Pickles, Pickles, Pickles with those guys. So it's been really fun to be around the West Coast League. And it's funny because I started shooting video in, Little League coach pitch with their manager at the time. He invited me in, and just over the last few years, it's snowballed to I just got to get another baseball game, and I've got to find a way to keep working in baseball. And this is really the only opportunity that's close to home. I grew up in Seattle, love going over there for Mariner games, but it's still it means some travel. I've been able to travel some different places over the last few years doing video with my son, but it wears on the family. So it's a special thing that we get to do something here in Yakima, and we saw, I think, over the last especially since COVID, just a real struggle for the team to continue to connect with the Yakima Valley and put fans in the seats. And so slowly just brought together an ownership group that wanted to build something for the town and wanted to build something special that we saw could be done with other West Coast League teams too. Portland, it's a unique team, but it represents their community so beautifully. And we just look at this as an opportunity to do something special in a really cool culture here in Yakima. We've got a wonderful people, food, stories, music, and we really wanted to bring all that into a baseball team. So yeah, we finally got the team. We tried for a few years, and we're here now. It's exciting.
I am a huge believer in the West Coast League. Rob Nyer has been on the podcast before talking about the league as a whole. We're going to have future episodes coming up in the not too distant future on the Nanaimo Night Owls and the Victoria Harbor Cats. Obviously, we did an episode early on about the Portland Pickles. And so, so the West Coast League is featured prominently on Baseball by Design. Let's get into these Pippins. What's a Pippin? What does that mean to the people of Yakima Valley?
Yeah, so a Pippin traditionally it's an older apple variety, and I think it comes from really an apple that's just grown from seed. So pretty wild apple variety. Everything out here is a cultivar that's grafted onto rootstock out here. So everything in the Yakima Valley that's grown is if you were to take the seeds out of those apples and put them in the ground, you'd get a wildly different apple than the one that you took it from. So a Pippin is kind of a wild apple, and I think for us, especially when we look at our mascot, he's a little bit wild. He kind of comes from that volcanic Mount St. Helens ash, straight out of the dirt. So A pippin is a green apple that's just a hair wild.
And what is that? What's the relationship of this variety of apple or apples in general to the Yakima Valley?
Yeah, so recently I was, digging through all this stuff at the stadium and I found a pippin bag, so a front-loading apple picking bag, and I realized that at some point, a lot of these folks who started growing apples out here, 150 years ago, some staple varieties, but they're also looking for plenty of things that just would, grow well out here. And so I think that, the pippin's been around a long time. It's one of those very old apples, for its tart flavor, preserved well back in the day, put it in pies, but it kind of represents, I think, early, Western America in the sense that people came out here and planted what they could and saw what grew.
My understanding of the state of Washington centers around certainly baseball teams. And my daughter is a senior at Gonzaga University, so I've got some familiarity with Washington. Obviously, Seattle is out by the Sound. You've got the Tri-City Dust Devils and the Spokane Indians, who are much farther east in the state. Where does Yakima Valley situate in the state of Washington?
Yeah, we are pretty much in the southern center of the state. So 2 hours east of Seattle, 3 hours west of Spokane. We're about, 3 hours northeast of Portland, about an hour from the Columbia River. So we're right kind of smack dab in the center. So it is a desert out here. It's a rain shadow from, the Cascade Mountains to our west, Mount Rainier, Mount Adams. We've got great views of both of those. But yeah, the Yakima River flows through this desert and has kind of given water to this, make this arid valley into something that's been pretty fertile. And, especially over the last 100 years, they've done really well to irrigate and create canal systems that have been able to help us exist. So yeah, the apple is really the origin story, and hops too. I mean, hops have been around for a long time for the beer industry, but it is a really big part of our story here. Is this desert that's just full of billions of apples.
I don't know that with the rest of the United States, when you think of Washington, you necessarily think of agriculture. And so this team has really called out the agriculture of the area in an important way. Why is that agricultural story important to you to tell about about the area through this team?
Yeah, so I mean, when you look at not just our, apple production, but cherries and hops, I mean, it's pretty significant. I think we grow 75% of the nation's hops, or maybe even the world's hops. We grow about 75% of the nation's apples. I mean, it's over 5 billion apples a year. And yeah, when you think of the Pacific Northwest, you don't think of these kind of dry desert, arid areas, but we produce quite a bit of the nation's, fruit and food.
I'm curious, as you're getting involved with this team relatively recently, what do you think the power of a collegiate summer level team in a community like this is to sort of tell that story, or for that community to sort of rally around as their own?
Yeah, I think it's pretty special that it's grassroots, and in summer baseball, collegiate summer baseball is really my favorite level of baseball. When you look at these guys that are coming from, a lot of them come from California. We have some local guys. We get some guys, from the South too. Eventually we have a couple of Japanese players this year too, which is really exciting. But I think it's really a special way for the community, especially to host these players, which is really neat. These guys live with their host families throughout the summer. I've been doing some research about the Yakima Bears and other, professional affiliated baseball history in here in Yakima, and it's kind of amazing. We have 7 major leaguers that played for the Pippins now. 6 of them currently. Kenny Rosenberg just moved over to Korea, but if you look over the last decade of Bears players too. We really have just about as many major league players that come from the Pippins as the Bears did from their affiliated team. So, those guys are all, kind of mid-round draft picks, but, they're playing high A short season baseball. And you'd expect more of those guys to make the majors, even from the Northwest League. But it's nice to know too that, quite a few Pippins every summer have an opportunity to get drafted, opportunity to play in the major league. So I think it's a really special opportunity to connect with these guys when they're even younger. Some of them are even 17 years old. They might have, just be going and, finishing up their senior year of high school, going into their freshman year in college. And it's a unique time to make a deep connection with these players.
You mentioned the Yakima Bears. They were named for the city of Yakima, which is, I don't have this information off the top of my head. I looked it up. It's the 11th largest city in the state of Washington. and it is a population of just shy of 100,000 people. That's Yakima. Yakima Valley, which, the Pippins are named for, obviously, that is 214 miles through this enormous basin. So a much larger area that it's representing and sort of speaking for with this brand. How important to you is it that this team is speaking for that larger valley area rather than just the city of Yakima?
Yeah, I think Yakima Valley in itself tells a little bit of a different story, like you mentioned, that not only covers a bigger area, but it really does, hint at the, geography and our growing culture here. So, Yakima is more than 50% Hispanic. And I think, paying tribute and building a brand around this story of an apples is really the best representation possible, because without the apple and without the folks who grow it, who pick and pack our apples too, we really don't exist. I've often said that baseball is the most powerful secular force to unite people in America, and in Yakima that's definitely true as well. I mean, we gather people from all walks of life, and yeah, that name Yakima Valley and even the Pippins, it really does tell a small story about the people that are going to be there at the ballpark on an evening, in a summer evening. I think the apple industry has struggled, but baseball's been historically the way that people come together and kind of forget about the troubles of the day, or can sit around and enjoy a beverage. But it's a special way that we have a baseball team that truly represents a community through our brand.
All right, I have an Apple question for you here,
Yeah.
which is the city of Yakima, the city seal has a big red apple on it. Obviously, the Pippins have a big green apple on it. Which one's better, red apples or green apples?
I'm actually a golden delicious guy. They don't grow them as much anymore, so I'll go right in the middle. But I think the city of Yakima's crest is probably, I don't think it's a red delicious. It's probably more towards like a honey crisp, even though it's a solid red. But I'll stick with the golden delicious. Let's go neutral here.
I think the breed of apple that one is called is clip art. I think that is a clip art apple in the city seal there. All due respect to the city of Yakima. Are there apple festivals? Are there sort of cultural things centered around the apple? I'm imagining a world in Yakima Valley where the apple is really celebrated. Do I have that right?
It needs to be celebrated more, I'd say. Our stadium is in the parking lot essentially of the state fairgrounds in Yakima, which is nice. And they have great agricultural exhibits. So, each, FFA group in the harvest season right during the state fair, they have some really cool displays that are, beautiful apple displays that, the art, that they create with apples and other, produce is pretty significant and special. But no, there needs to be more in Yakima. So we'll see. Maybe we can do something as a baseball team.
Jordan, before I let you go, I did have one more question I wanted to ask you about that. This is not the first iteration of the Pippins. There was a previous team called the Pippins in the history of Yakima or Yakima Valley. What was that team, and how has that served to sort of inspire this new version of the Pippins?
Yeah, so when we did become a West Coast League team in 2014, I think it was actually coined, the Pippins, Yakima Valley Pippins. It was coined by Bob Garrettson Jr. So his dad was a star for the original Yakima Pippins. They played in the Western Industrial League pre-World War II, 1937, 1941. But yeah, so Bob Sr. was a part of that team. Bob Jr. has been a part of, Yakima baseball lore for a really long time with Yakima Valley College and some other affiliated teams here. And then his son, Bob Sr.'s grandson, Jeff Garrettson, was RGM with the Pippins for 10 years. So when the Pippins did come around, I think Bob Jr. was the one who said it should be the Pippins, which is pretty exciting. So that's only one of two brand names in Yakima that really have paid homage to the fruit industry. The other one were the Yakima Packers. I think they were a Milwaukee Braves affiliate. But yeah, it's really special that our brand is tied to our local industry.
Well, Jordan, this has been so much fun. Like, honestly, like, I love this story. I love the fact that you're focusing not just on the agriculture, but on the people who make up that agricultural context. The place where you play is so many different stories, and I feel like this brand does a great job of representing those. Where can people find the work that you're doing? You referenced some documentaries that you've worked on with Major League Baseball and with the Pickles, and I know you've got some other stuff in the works. And then, of course, as a team, where can people go get themselves some Pippins gear?
Yeah, well, we are revamping all of our merchandise. So I think come March, we're going to have some pretty cool jerseys. We do have a really cool vintage inspired Yakima Valley jersey that I'm really excited about. Some new hats that just really kind of scream Yakima Valley, which will be sweet. But you can find it, yeah, at pippinsbaseball.com, pippinsgear.com. You can follow us on socials. You can find Pickles on MLB.tv for at least a few more months. We may put it somewhere else after that, but it's a fun story. If you want to learn more about the West Coast League, it's a great story. You learn really about kind of the Pickles unique brand there. Come check us out. We'd love to have you come out in the summer, and can't wait for summer baseball.
I will absolutely try to get out there, especially while I still have a child in school in the state. I'm not sure how much longer that's going to be since she's graduating soon. So yeah, absolutely, we'll try to get there. Jordan, thanks so much. This has been a ton of fun.
Thanks so much, Paul. Really glad to be here.
All right, everyone, welcome back. Hey, guess what? It's designer extraordinaire Dan Simon, prolific minor league baseball designer of Studio Simon, Louisville-based Studio Simon. Dan, hey, how's it going?
Since the last time we spoke, which was not all that long ago, the same, which was fantastic.
We're talking about the Yakima Valley Pippins, where agriculture is a big deal, and you created a logo based on a green apple.
I did indeed. I think it may have been the first fruit identity I ever developed. I'm certain I developed food and or produce identities prior to that, but I think this is my first fruit.
In general, agriculture as a source for minor league baseball logos and identities. I know you have the thing that I call the spreadsheet, but which is actually just an Illustrator file with columns of text, where you have sorted all of the minor league baseball teams according to their inspiration and what they feature in their logos. Is agriculture? It's pretty common, yeah. It's a pretty big inspiration for minor league baseball logos.
For sure, although not having the spreadsheet open in front of me, I couldn't tell you necessarily how many
Yeah.
there are, but I know I've done a number, and just off the top of my head, we've got the focus of today's episode, the Yakima Valley Pippins. I mentioned other fruits, Savannah bananas, Columbus clingstones. I've done vegetables. You've got the Cedar Rapids kernels. I should stop now because I'm going to be forgetting some, and I don't want to make it seem like those were top of mind and the others were afterthoughts, because they're all top of mind. They just don't all come to mind.
You love all your children the same. The one that I think of right away, because we were there at a game together, is the Columbus Clingstones, which is an adorable little character. But if I think about, your Clingstone character, who I really like very much, there's a lot of similarities between that and, say, Big Lex from the Lexington Legends. And that's a baseball character, not a fruit or a vegetable. So does it matter to you if you're anthropomorphizing a fruit or a vegetable or something else? Is it the same kind of challenge?
Well, the thing about fruit, for whatever reason, thinking back on however many of these I've done, I don't feel like any of them provided any insurmountable hurdles. Even when you have different shapes, a banana is a very different shape than an apple or a peach, but they all lent themselves very well to anthropomorphication.
You should keep that banana idea in your back pocket. That could be a big deal someday. I think that could be really a big hit if you ever made a logo out of a banana.
Well, you are trying to be kind of funny there.
Trying to be kind of funny, I think, is the best probably I could hope for there.
But it might come out in our conversation about the Yakima Valley Pippins that there might have been a direction proposed for the Pippins that got used later.
I can't wait to ask you that question. And I'm going to start asking questions right now about the Yakima Valley Pippins. I always sort of ask you, like, what were the challenges? What were the considerations? One of the things I notice about this one right away is a very pleasing, very sort of subdued color palette. Like, you don't see a lot of sports brands outside of minor league baseball that don't have any warm colors in them, right? Like, they want to be sort of more like bold and in your face. And this is a very sort of Pacific Northwest, Pacific feeling color palette. The light blue, the couple of different greens. We're going to talk about apples, but I want to talk about the color palette first. Was that at your direction? Was that your idea to come at it with these colors, or was it just sort of directed by the subject matter? Were you directed to do a green apple instead of a red apple? I have so many questions about colors, Dan.
Well, for certain, it didn't come from me. It came from the apple. The apple is a bright green apple. A pippin is a bright green apple. And that was actually, it was pretty cool to be able to do that. Stereotypically, apples, of course, are pink.
Apples are pink, you say.
Okay.
You raised your eyebrows when you said that at me, like you were baiting me into something here.
I just wanted to see what your reaction would be, because of course, stereotypically, apples are red. And this was an opportunity to do a different apple. So the color of the apple informed the beginning of the color palette. When we do brand identities, the darkest color is usually either black, which it is in many brand identities because it's a neutral darker color. It can go with anything almost, or navy blue. Those are typically your two dark outline, shadow, holding colors. In this case, now we could have used black or navy blue, frankly, but because the apple is this bright green color, we felt, both me and my client contact on that, who was the part owner, president, and general manager, a gentleman by the name of Zachary Fraser, we felt that a dark green would make a good dark color for this, because the two greens together would really say green, which is what this apple's color is, and it is such an important visual component of what this apple is.
Now, you see a lot of baseball identities that use complementary colors, right? Like you see a lot of blue and orange, like they're complements. But you paired the lighter green and the darker green with a very pleasing, subtle kind of sky blue, rather than green's complement red. Part of that is because red and green is just Christmas, right? Like, and we got the holidays coming up here at the time of this recording. And so, there's a sort of specific association already with red and green. But the decision to pair that green with a very pleasing, subdued light blue, rather than with green's complement red, was obviously intentional.
It was indeed intentional. When we were putting together the first round concepts, some of them had as a background the suggestion of apple orchards. And above those apple orchards was as you described it, a sky blue sky.
The letter for that in the box score is SBS, Sky Blue
yes.
Sky.
Well, I needed to say sky, and its color was not just blue, but sky. There were a number of different blues. So it was a sky blue, which
SBB.
is SBB.
Yeah.
Though the logos we ended up with, the primary logo and the secondary logos, did not feature an actual sky with, maybe white clouds in it. From the first round directions that were presented, we saw that with those two greens, the bright green and the dark green, and that light blue, it just was a very pleasing color palette.
Now, green is generally accepted as a cool color, but there's such a thing as a warm green, right? Like there's a green that can be, green is yellow and blue. Yellow is a warm color, blue is a cool color. So, you can have greens that are closer to yellow than they are to blue. And so there's a little bit of a sort of electricity there in that specific green. It is more of a yellow green than a blue green for sure. So that's a lot of color talk, Dan. I know that people want to get into like, what do these teams mean here? And so, but I just find the color palette to be really very interesting. We were talking about anthropomorphizing earlier, and this character is, when I think about apples, I think, and we even mentioned the clingstones earlier. When you talk about fruit, like fruit's delicate, fruit can bruise. And so taking something delicate and apples, God, like what's worse than a bruised apple, right? Like maybe a bruised peach actually, but
You know
this.
what's worse
Oh yeah,
than a bruised apple?
what's that?
When you take a bite out of an apple
Oh, here we
and
go.
there's half a worm in it.
Which is worse than a whole worm.
Yeah, so that's what's worse than a bruised apple.
But anyway, the question that I have here is like this guy, he's got like a great big grin. He's got a sort of mischievous look on his face here, right? So he doesn't the character is not delicate, but the fruit itself is. That juxtaposition for you as a designer, you're trying to undo the delicateness of this fruit, I imagine, by creating a sort of tougher looking character. Am I right about that?
Well, you're right about it, although I will say the word tough is not necessarily the look we were going for. But the original rendering of this apple had more of a sly smile, like some of the other characters I've done in minor league baseball brand identities. And Zachary specifically, I guess internally, they had this vision of the apple as a superhero.
Mm.
And so they asked me if I could give this apple kind of the they didn't even say a grin. They just said, can you make him look like this would have been the head of a superhero?
Mm.
And so I then went to look, did my research into superheroes, and there's all these images from comic books or whatever when on the cover with the superhero with his hands on or her hands on his or her hips and kind of like looking up a little bit and with that big old superhero grin. So that was the intention here. And if you look at their mascot, you will see that he's kind of buff, upper body buff, like a superhero, and he's got that big grin on him, and he looks like a superhero.
Yeah, the mascot character has a he's got they certainly carried that big grin. I'm trying to keep my safe rating on Apple here, so I'm not saying the phrase that I want to say, but it's definitely keeping that he's got a certain style of grin on his face.
It's a something eating grin.
Exactly, exactly. And so they certainly transferred that over onto the mascot, and it on a 3D character has a very different effect. It's a little bit terrifying. We talked when we did the episode about the Savannah bananas. You used the phrase "badass banana" over and over again, right? Like a banana. There's a narrow window between when it's too green and too ripe, and so that. Bananas are also kind of delicate there. So I definitely think that fruit, there's more of a motivation, I would think, for a designer to make the fruit to undo the delicateness of fruit when you're anthropomorphizing it. So I don't know if that's true or not. That is just my perception of fruit-based logos that I have seen in minor league baseball. I did want to talk to you about this other logo, Dan. Before we go get to the stumper, I want to talk to you about this other logo that you created for them, which is it features, it's a round L as well, and it says Yakima Valley Pippins. And then it has a different green apple, not the anthropomorphized one, but more just a stylized illustration of a green apple with the interlocking letters Y and V for Yakima Valley. And these are two letters that sort of nest neatly together, but you did some things with serifs to sort of make them look like they had kind of almost like interlocked like a belt buckle or something like that. So this is a different kind of interlocking letter than you often see in baseball. What were your considerations? What were the challenges coming up with interlocking a Y and a V like that?
Well, with any dual letter logo, you got to figure out how the two letters are going to work together. And you are, in general, you don't get to determine how they work together. They tell you how we're going to work together. Sometimes when letters have two similar shape, two TOO similar shapes, they can be difficult to work together. In this case, it kind of worked out nicely. It doesn't look like your expected baseball two-letter logo, but I think it still works well.
So you say that it depends on the letters, and you're giving a lot of credit to the letters themselves, and you're making it sound like graphic designers sort of just work with what's handed to them. And to a certain extent, yeah, these letters have a basic shape, but you still have to work with stroke widths and serifs and the ways in which these letters can work together. So I think you're deferring too much to just the shapes of the letter and just making it sound like designers don't have any control over how these work together. And I think what you did in particular with the serifs on the V being in front of the Y, with the rest of the V being behind the Y, really gives them, there's a dimensionality to that I think is very clever and isn't just a function of the fact that the Y and the V have kind of a similar shape. So
Well,
give
yeah,
yourself some credit there, Dan.
well, we're taking what we're given, and then we have to be a designer. And in this case, I wanted there to be something that suggests an interlocking kind of interplay between them.
All right, Dan, last question. The story, the larger story that this logo tells is of agriculture in the Yakima Valley, obviously important to that part of the state of Washington. The previous team there had been the Yakima Bears, which was a more sort of generic name for a team. How much a part of the conversations that you had with Zachary Frazier were about this sort of larger story of agriculture, or was it more focused on developing this character and the interlocking letters logo?
Well, I got to know Zachary when he was the assistant GM for the Orem Owls.
Oh yeah, Owls with a Z.
We then got to know each other better by meeting and spending time together at the baseball winter meetings. So I've known Zachary for quite a while. And even before baseball became, the branding of baseball became what it is today, Zachary was really onto that already. So even though he wasn't the one, he's not the one that decided that the Orem Owls were going to become the Owls. It was the team owner that decided that. But when he then became my direct client contact and chief operator of the Walla Walla Sweets, he knew right away that he wanted to name the team the Walla Walla Sweets because he wanted a connection directly to the community and to the industry there, in this case, agriculture, and specifically the Walla Walla sweet onion. And when he came to me to do the Yakima Valley identity, he, as was the case with Walla Walla, he already knew what he was going to name the team, and that was Pippins. And for the same reason that he named the Walla Walla team the Sweets. Local industry, specifically agriculture, and more specifically, Pippin apples.
Dan, this is a logo that I really like. I have this on a hat. I've never been to a game, but I do have a Pippins hat that it's very comfortable, and I wear it a lot. So, and it's got a fun logo. I have two hats with apples on them. I've got this one, and then I've got the Fort Wayne tin caps.
Well, there's one other apple hat you can get, another team in the same league in which the Yakima Valley Pippins play, and that team is the Wenatchee Apple Sox.
And I'm recording this episode, Dan, on a MacBook Pro.
Made by
a certain apple-based company, a fruit-based company out in California. So, Dan, it feels like we've already been through a fair amount of trivia here, so there's going to be more coming. We're going to talk to you momentarily for a Studio Simon Stumper. In the meantime, thank you for opening up the Wayback Machine and chatting with me about this project from more than a decade ago. It's a fun logo, and as I've been saying all episode, I really want to get out there and see a game, especially while I still have a child who is in college in the state of Washington.
Go Zags, and I'll see you in several minutes.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I am so pleased to have on the Baseball by Design podcast John Devaney, who is the president of the Washington State Tree Fruit Association. John, how you doing?
Doing great, thank you.
Pippin is not a term I was necessarily familiar with before I started asking about this team. What's a pippin?
Well, pippin is it's historically it's a variety of apple, but it's also synonymous with something that's really fantastic. Apples have a lot of identity and brand identity, and it's that variety was chosen for its great eating quality, and it was very popular about 100 years ago. And to say someone's a Pippin or a Pip was just to say they were fantastic. And so it both has the connection to being outstanding as a category and having the tie to the apple heritage of the Yakima Valley in Washington State.
You used the phrase apple heritage of the Yakima Valley in Washington State. What is that heritage?
Well, apples, of course, grow pretty widely throughout the northern and southern hemisphere in these temperate zones. So there's a lot of places that apples grow, but they were really associated with westward expansion in the U.S. I mean, you talk about Johnny Appleseed, and that being a byword for people moving westward. You had to have apples if you're going to get there, and being as American as apple pie, apples were a big part of U.S. growth and development. What happened is, as settlers got to this part of the country, they found that this was really an ideal part of the world to grow apples. Botanists will tell you that the apple really evolved in Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, high desert climates like that. And though they grow in other places, they grow fantastically well in that sort of high desert climate. So when settlers got here to the Pacific Northwest and with bringing some heritage apple varieties with them, they found that this climate, along with reliable irrigation water from the Columbia River system, was just fantastic for growing really outstanding fruit. And then when we started getting reliable transportation, the bountiful crops that we could grow here suddenly became able to be transported in refrigerated train cars to population centers back east. And so those two factors, great climate and great transportation, made Yakima Valley and the Wenatchee Valley the real centers of apple production in the early 20th century.
Is your association allowed to take a stance between if the Wenatchee Apple Sox are playing the Yakima Valley Pippins? Does that
we try to be neutral in those circumstances. It's like when your kids are having a fight, you just want to settle down, guys. Let's keep it polite.
Is it a coincidence that the Yakima Bears switched their identity the same year, 2014, as the founding of the Washington State Tree Fruit Association, 2014? Those things happened 11 years ago.
Yeah, I would say that is a coincidence, though I think that there has certainly been a growth of people recognizing their heritage foods and local foods. We do grow a lot of apples here, and it's local to us. And sometimes we forget how prominent we are in how much our area is tied to our global identity as Washington State around apples. Often governors and senators will come from abroad and say, I was in Vietnam and I saw a Washington apple box. It's like that's our ambassador to the rest of the world, is these products that we sell. A lot of folks talk about local food being what is closest to them being the best, but often I point out that the best thing is where it grows best. You have better environmental footprint if you grow something in an ideal climate. So we have in the Yakima Valley a really fantastic environment for growing fruit, and so we are globally recognized for that. And Washington State is the #1 apple producing state in the nation. About 2/3 of the fresh apples produced in the U.S. are grown in Washington, and Yakima County is the #1 apple producing county. So this is really the center of U.S. apple production as well. And so it's known locally, but I think sometimes we forget how much our locality is known for that agricultural production.
It's interesting, you say that it's known locally. I grew up in the Philadelphia area, and so my view of the U.S. can get a little Eastern centric sometimes. But, New York is the Big Apple. There are minor league teams that have alternate identities based on apple pies and apples in the sort of New England, especially New York region. So I think, for Washington to be staking its claim as the sort of central apple growing region in the United States is it's factually true, but there's a public relations campaign that needs to happen too, don't you think?
Well, there is a public relations campaign. It's also just doing something really well.
Yeah.
When you have a great climate, we can produce really high quality fruit that is in demand in other places. We even when we're having trade issues. We still export apples to China, for example, which is the world's largest apple producer.
Huh.
There's our products are really very much in demand. So I would say it's more about we're at the top of a very competitive category. And so that's something to be proud of. It's one thing to win when no one else is in the race. It's quite another to be in a very competitive global category like Apple growing and still be the best place in the world for that.
It'd be like if you said the Colorado Rockies are the best major league team in the Mountain Time Zone, right? It's not a long list.
Exactly.
You've got the Apple Sox and you've got the Pippins, obviously, and there are other sort of agriculture based teams in that West Coast League. What is the role of agriculture to the Yakima Valley? How significant a portion of the economy is it of the livelihood of the folks who live there?
Yeah, agriculture, this is still very much an agricultural community. We have a diverse economy, but still about a quarter of our jobs are directly tied to production agriculture. And then when you look at other industries like manufacturing, often it's just, manufacture packaging or equipment that supports the agricultural industry. So this is really a center of excellence for agricultural production, not just in terms of climate, but skill sets and technology. And it's something our community is really proud of. Agriculture has both its pros and cons. It's a slow growth industry generally, but it's also somewhat recession proof. It's cyclical, but no one's going to stop eating. And so it's not an industry you worry about going away entirely. And it is that connection to what sustains all of us in our daily lives that is a tangible thing. You don't have the cubicle life associations that a lot of other industries have, where you might know something is economically important, but no one gets romantic about, people filing spreadsheets around on their computers. But producing healthy food and something that's a recognizable single product, like a fresh apple, is something that people connect with, emotionally and understand intuitively, and they feel good about.
As a variety, the Pippin, does it have certain qualities like a certain toughness or stick-to-itiveness or, bitterness? Is there something about the Pippin that would make it a good baseball mascot?
You know, Pippins, I think, are one of those varieties of apples that are not nearly as commonly grown. So I will confess, I have yet to eat a Pippin apple.
Wow.
They're out there, but there's of course there's hundreds and hundreds of different apple varieties. So it's not one that you get commonly now, but still that word, because it was such a popular variety, is associated with being outstanding and the top of its class. And I think it's that both the apple heritage and the association with being the best, and that became a byword, being a great name for the Pippins.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about here is that you're with the Washington State Tree Fruit Association. Does every state have a tree fruit association?
No, not every state does, because not every state has enough apple production to have an association for itself. But there's a number of states that do. Michigan, Pennsylvania, New York, California are states that have enough production that they have their own state associations. A lot of our issues are about making sure that both the labor standards and the food standards of our production are something to be proud of as well, and making sure that our growers have the information that they need to be effective, and making sure that public policy issues are not going to harm the production and distribution of the product.
Do you have to be neutral when it comes to the other tree fruits like plums and cherries and peaches and pears, that sort of thing? Or
When
you
they're
can,
grown on trees, yes. I
okay.
don't have to be as fair to vines and shrubs. So
No.
wine grapes, juice grapes, and blueberries, not as much. But apples, pears, and cherries, fantastic.
John, this has been fun. Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking a moment out of your day to chat with me about apples in the state of Washington. There's so much to learn about this. If people want to learn more, where can they go to find what the work that the Washington State Tree Fruit Association is doing?
They can go to WSTFA for Washington State Tree Fruit Association.org and learn more about our state's apples and other tree fruits. And I really appreciate the chance to be on. Apples and baseball are two iconic American themes, and it's great when we can bring them together.
Absolutely, yeah. And I didn't get a chance to ask Jordan this question, but I hope that they are serving apples in little miniature ice cream helmets at the baseball game. Some sort of apple dessert in an ice cream helmet.
Always the healthy choice. Yeah.
John, thank you so much. This has been great. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul.
All right, everyone, welcome back. Guess what? It's Dan Simon of Studio Simon here with a Studio Simon Stumper about the West Coast League, about produce, about the Pacific Northwest, about collegiate summer ball. I don't know. I spend hours researching potential topics in the hopes that I might stumble across the thing that Dan might ask a question about. Let's see if I did it this time.
Well, one of the things that I sometimes use as the source for my Studio Simon Stumper are mascots. And being that we spoke about the mascot, if not at great length, at least it was an important part of why this particular brand identity looks like it does, specifically his big.
Is this going to be a question about his shit-eating grin?
It is going to be a question. Wait, are you allowed to say that? Do you have
probably bleeped it?
Yeah, well, and you can say that on podcasts. You can say it. It's
you
just a
can,
matter
but
of whether...
Apple says I have a clean rating right now, and
okay.
I self-proclaim a clean rating, so I'll probably beep that.
Okay, so let's talk about this mascot. Our Studio Simon Stumper today asks, what is the name of the Yakima Valley Pippins mascot? Is it Wally the Rippin' Pippin? Is it Scott T. Pippin? Or is it Pippi Greenstocking?
Scott T. Pippen is funny, but I don't know if Scottie Pippen, the basketball player, has anything to do with the Pacific Northwest or with the state of Washington. Wally, I'm a little nervous because we talked a lot about the relationship between the Walla Walla Sweets and this team. So would Wally be too close to a nickname for the Walla Walla Sweets? And then Pippi Greenstocking. That would be a reference to Pippi Longstocking. I don't know whether Pippi Longstocking is a male or a female character, and I don't know whether this mascot is a male or a female character. I'm calling him he, and he sort of presents as male, so I would think that we're looking at him being a male character. And so I'm going to circle all the way back to the first one that I kind of sort of eliminated. I'm going to go with Scott T. Pippen.
Well, sometimes you circle back and you shouldn't. Sometimes you don't circle at all and you should. In this case, you circled and you are spot on with the correct answer to today's Studio Simon Stumper. Wow. It is... The name of the mascot is Scott T. Pippen, which for any of you who don't know, and I would imagine most of the people listening to this are sports fans. And even if you're not sports fans of a certain age, you've heard of Scottie Pippen, who was Michael Jordan's teammate on the Chicago Bulls. He's a basketball Hall of Famer, a 7-time All-Star, a 6-time world champion, an Olympic gold medalist as part of the 1992 USA Dream Team. And did you know that you were wondering if he had any relation to either the Yakima Valley or even the Pacific Northwest. He does not. Do you know he was born in Hamburg?
No, I did not know that. I thought you were going to tell me he was born in, Pasco, Washington or something. So
no, he was born in Hamburg, Arkansas.
Hamburg, Arkansas. I see.
Yes.
You led me astray again there, Dan.
See what I did there?
I do. I absolutely do see what you did. Scott T. Pippen. So they just thought it was a funny little pun. I wonder if they got permission from Scottie Pippen's people to do that, or if they just asked forgiveness rather than permission.
The latter, I'm sure, is the case. Hey, let me just mention, you were familiar enough with Pippi Longstocking to know that Pippi Greenstocking was informed by that character. But you did not know that whether Pippi Longstocking was male or female,
right.
You said.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, and I would imagine I'd be really curious if all of you listeners out there who are on social media and are inclined to interact with Paul, please chime in to the Baseball by Design podcast socials and let us know if you even know what or who Pippi Longstocking is before me telling you right now that Pippi Longstocking comes from a series of children's books about a fictional red-haired, pigtailed, freckled Swedish girl. It's a Swedish thing. It goes back to I think it might even go back to the 1930s, at the latest, maybe the 1940s. And it did make its way over to America through, I think they were like TV movies about Pippi Longstocking. And I remember seeing that in repeats when I was a very, very young kid. So, and just remember thinking, what the heck is this?
Well, now I know, and I sort of thought Pippi Longstocking was not the name for a big superhero-ish mascot. What was Wally? Why was that on the list?
I guess it just I made that up and I guess it just sounded good.
Okay, all right, very good. Well, Dan, thank you as always. I always love our Studio Simon Stumpers. I'm just going to say this, even though I could say it off air. At the time of this recording, we're 2 days from Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you and happy Thanksgiving to all you listeners. And I will see you next week.
See you next week, Dan.